And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast for this YouTube Mailbag exclusive. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. The big old bag of mail is overflowing, and we want to try out some of these limited release drops, give you, the YouTube subscriber, a unique and exclusive opportunity to get even more Cover 3, check in a little bit on the weekend. But let's dive right in, because with the NFL draft coming up, this is a good question coming to us from Dominic. Hey guys, love the show. All the different personalities make it extremely enjoyable and make all the takes just a little bit different from each other. My question is about players coming out of high school already having the generational label on them. For instance, this year, obviously, Trevor Lawrence going in the draft. Coming out of high school, he was already seen as the number one pick in 2021. If you are a player in this situation, would it be more beneficial for you to pick your school based on how they specifically develop your position? For instance, Lawrence is great. His stats may have been a bit lower, but he could, if he had gone to Duke and worked under David Cutcliffe. Of course, he would not have won or even competed for a national championship, or with the possible injury risk, in his case, of working behind an inferior offensive line, or in other cases, possibly inferior teammates, hurt enough that it would justify picking the most elite school anyway. Thanks for answering, and I hope you all are staying safe and healthy with your loved ones. Thank you, Dominic. It's very nice.
Very nice. And he complimented all of us on the show, so that's pretty cool. So I think he actually answered his own question in much the way I'm going to answer it here, Chip. So was Trevor Lawrence seen as a no-doubter? Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, he's pretty rare. I mean, he's like the highest rated quarterback we've had like forever. And, Justin was pretty much a no-doubter as well behind it, but, with more questions. One of the things that makes these kids a no-doubter in my mind is their competitive nature. Trevor Lawrence took his team to multiple state title games in Georgia. Like, they want to play with the best players. They are ultra competitive, guys who want to beat your butt regardless of what game you're playing. I mean, if it's ping pong, if paper, rock, scissors, who cares? And if you go to a school like Duke as a player like that, even though I think you can argue that Cutcliffe and his offensive coaching is great. I mean, he's a tremendous quarterback coach, and I don't think anybody would disagree with you. And I know for a fact that like some of the other coaches out there who are regarded as QB gurus look up to him and like pay attention to which quarterbacks he's offering. But did you see Duke's offensive line this year?
Right? Oh, it's awful. And they had injury issues, but those, like, even then it revealed the depth that Duke just does not have 8 guys that are going to be able to go and hold their own against ACC competition.
So in my mind, the downside risk is far more significant if you were to pull that move relative to the reward of the upside risk. Like, might you get better quarterback coaching at Duke than you do at Clemson? Potentially, although I do think that Clemson's not the best example to contrast this to, because they've put, they're about to put a third guy in the NFL. I mean, did Taj Boyd go undrafted? But like, he was still a really good player. Deshaun Watson, obviously total stud. Lawrence is going to be, he's going to go 1-1. And then DJ, I mean, it's too early to say he's going to go 1-1, but like, if I said first round or not, DJ right now,
it's first round.
I'm going to take first round.
150.
Yeah. So I just think that the downside there does, it outweighs the potential upside in my mind, because you could get a more serious injury if you're getting hit all the time, like you do behind an inferior talent offensive line. You may not look as good, right? I mean, Mac Jones is going to go in the first round. I think Mac Jones is a pretty good player, and I understand why he's getting first round hype, but have a Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, and then when Waddle goes down, John Mechie to throw to, or Najee to hand the ball off to, or 5 guys who are going to play in the league to block for you. That does make you look better. It helps you get noticed. Now, maybe you would argue Trevor Lawrence doesn't need to get noticed. He's already noticed, but your numbers do matter, and there's a reason that players from best teams oftentimes get picked.
So I think that the good example is DJ Uyunglele, who chose Clemson knowing that he was not going to play during, or expecting, obviously he does end up stepping in and throwing for daggum 439 yards against Notre Dame because of Trevor Lawrence's positive COVID diagnosis. But he chooses Clemson because of probably like an iron sharpens iron type mentality. You get to work with the best. It is maybe less about the coaching than it is about the players and the environment and being around other players that have the same goals and the same expectations. It's like getting, socially, maybe it's like being homeschooled versus going to school, right?
Yeah.
Just like being able to, sure, you can still progress and maybe get the same academic lessons, but there are some intangibles that come with being surrounded by your peers. You don't want to be in a bubble just because you can go get a unique coaching mentorship. I think that at Clemson, that environment that they have created where there are, we look at the behind the end zone at the Clemson spring game, and you've got 12 dudes under the age of 26 that all were just picked in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And you've got like other players in that locker room that have expectations of coming back to a spring game to be able to like show off and get big hugs from Dabo and to continue in that line. And so if you're a generational talent, you probably are picking elite programs as much for your peers as you are for your coaching.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just went to the opening finals and the All-America Bowl, and you're going to tell me you're going to go play with a bunch of guys who aren't good enough to play in that? No. I will say I think quarterback is also kind of a unique example here because it is a position that relies on its teammates a lot for individual success, right? We have seen examples of players who are, for the most part, much more highly rated than their teammates choosing schools at other positions if that school has a good reputation for developing them. For instance, Wisconsin is not really in the market for 5-star defensive backs, defensive linemen, although they do a good job with that, like linebackers, those type of players. Oh, they're getting some decent 4-stars at times. But they have signed multiple like 5-star type offensive tackles. Offensive tackle is not a position that is reliant on other players. If you go out there, you are pretty much one-on-one, especially if you're a good one, you're going to be a one-on-one. You're not going to get a whole lot of double team help. And the coaching there is really good, and players have noticed that. So I think that the potential there for that is greater at positions that do not rely on your teammates quite as much.
This next question comes from Shaqtonio. Shaqtonio says, "Hey guys, love the pod as always and never miss a show. With the return to normal in spring, I'm starting to notice that quarterback battles are being presented as even competitions, no matter what. Even if there's a clear leader, I'm seeing more and more 3 to 4 man battles than ever. At least that's what we're expected to believe, LOL. With the transfer portal era in full swing, do you think head coaches will start to wait later and later to name a starter or to keep guys from hitting the portal so soon?" So let me, with the transfer portal era in full swing, do you think head coaches will start to wait later and later to name a starter before to keep guys from hitting the portal so soon? Could we see the end of winning a starting job in the spring unless you're an incumbent starter from the prior season? How does this affect shaping a new team for the season when they don't know the quarterback starter until a few days before the season opener? Thanks, guys, for your feedback and keep up the good work.
He's on to it. So, Chip, what was the date that you have to be in the transfer portal now to be immediately eligible in the fall?
May 1.
I think we'll start naming starting quarterbacks on May 2.
Yeah.
I mean, like this is exactly what I would do if I was a head coach. And in fact, I would rig spring practice a little bit to make it more even, right? Like you could actually probably let the defensive coordinator know what play you're calling so he can send a certain blitz to where you make the guy you think you're going to name look a little bit worse. And, maybe you make the guy you think's the backup look a little bit better so that he doesn't transfer out. So that not only can you say it's an even battle, but you can rig it to where it actually looks like more of an even battle. I would absolutely do that to combat the transfer portal stuff. In fact, I think teams do. I mean, how many teams are still having an open competition going into the fall? A ton, right? I mean, that's
well, the charade of we've got 3 or 4. And this is what exactly comes to mind. The situation at LSU, where it sure seems like it's Miles Brennan and Max Johnson leading the way in that quarterback competition with Finley and Nussmeier. According to reports, going through spring, and they were divvying up first team snaps among all 4 quarterbacks. And Ed Odron himself comes out and says, just for competitive purposes to get our team ready, at some point in the fall, we've got to cut this thing down, but not hinting at the obvious, which is when they start fall camp, it's probably going to be Miles Brennan and Max Johnson leading that quarterback competition. So I assume that LSU's offensive staff was divvying up all of those first team reps across all 4 quarterbacks and talking about it like a 4-way quarterback competition, maybe with the transfer portal in mind. Like, is that too far of a reach to guess there?
I don't think that's too far. I mean, now look, I don't want to be nefarious here and think that all these schools are doing this. I think there are some schools that have legitimate quarterback battles. But if I was a little bit sketchy about my quarterback depth, I would absolutely create a quarterback battle just to prevent the kid from, because having to be in by, you said May 1?
Yeah.
Like having to be in by May 1 is pretty important. A lot of kids don't want to transfer if they have to sit out a year. That's
right.
why we saw a mass exodus to the portal when kids realized they would be, eligible immediately. I also wonder, are we going to start to see teams move their spring game dates back?
Like we saw a lot of now, May 1 is the last big day. That is like, we're going to get there's May 1 is almost all the Power 5 except Stanford, which comes in on like May 22 for
Are they on the quarter system? So some of these schools that are on the quarter system, it makes it a little bit weird.
Yeah, there's definitely it is the whole football academic relationship at Stanford is unique enough that I think that we mentioned on here, they got their first early enrollee quarterback ever this spring. I guess it's just the way that the clearance process works for prospects. The early signing period has not been kind to David Shaw and the Stanford Cardinal, but that's beside the point. May 1 is the last big day of spring games. And to your point, if that May 1 date, I don't know yet if that May 1 date is temporary or if that May 1 date is permanent. But if it is permanent, then I would absolutely assume that we see spring games wrapped up for the most part, like whatever the Saturday is before that, to be able to, not push right up against that May 1 deadline.
Absolutely right.
You don't want them to, like, you don't want players to like be forced to stick around, right? There'd be no way it goes the other way where we're going to push them back so you're stuck.
Well, I mean, you kind of do want them to stick around. Like if they suck, I mean, I don't want to say players suck, but like if they're not going to help you, you don't really care if they bounce. But if there's somebody who you're like, this is our backup, we need him for the fall, then yeah, you want to be like, to the extent you could pull it off, you do want to present this as a legitimate battle.
One more, we've got, we always say that if you had a spring gleaning that we did not get to, because we didn't do 127 of them, you can submit a request in the mailbag and we'll get to it. So here we go. From GSU BLH, great show. I listen to every episode while I work out. Best talk on college football, period. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't mention the lack of Sun Beast coverage and more specifically, Georgia Southern. The conference really shined in 2020 and will show again this fall as the top group of 5 conference. But showering your comments to the team whose fans, quote, slow dance and drink adult beverages with goats. But who's he talking about there?
I'm not even sure. I was getting blasted by Slack DMs here.
Okay.
Like I was getting a bunch at once. I must have. You ever do the thing where it's like delay DMs for like an hour?
Oh, and so like
the snooze
You
snooze
thought we'd be
function.
done by now?
I think I just normally have it set to snooze during the recording of the pod, but since we're doing the extra, like I just got like 7 DMs at once. I need you to read that question again, Chip. I really apologize.
Okay.
I was like, what the hell's going on?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the lack of Sun Beast coverage, and more specifically, Georgia Southern. The conference really shined in 2020 and will show again this fall as a top group of 5 conference. But showering your comments to the team whose fans, quote, slow dance and drink adult beverages with goats is tough to make it through.
I don't know. Who is that?
I don't know. I don't like, so we've talked about Louisiana, right? And we've talked about Coastal, or no, we talked about App State. I don't know who else could be. Who slow dances and drinks adult beverages with goats?
I don't know. That's a good one. I really do think I'm interested to see what Georgia Southern is this year, because that division, like Sunbelt East, is kind of sneaky loaded, right? I mean, I don't think Troy's gonna be terrible. I don't think Georgia State's gonna be that bad. I know they have some pretty good athletes. App State should still be really good. Coastal again should be very, very good. Anytime you have a quarterback in that league, you're going to have a leg up on everybody, and Coastal certainly has a QB. Some things to like about Georgia Southern: they really took a nice step forward, defensively last year. I mean, they've been pretty steadily improving over the years. They have nice corners coming back. They got to replace Raymond Johnson III, who was like a big time tackle for loss guy. But I think they're going to be still a pretty decent defense. And you got to remember that this was a weird team too. If you look at their metrics, they had that game, was it with Campbell? I think it was.
They throttled. They won. Oh no, it was a close game. It was 27-26 against Campbell.
And Campbell is like, what are they, D2 or like bad FCS? Like they're not a great team. So like that kind of messes with your metrics. But Georgia Southern had so many guys out with COVID that that's one of those games you could probably argue shouldn't have been played. So if you kind of strip that out of their metrics, they look a heck of a lot better. And I'm not a big like, hey, let's take away their worst game type guy to evaluate a team. But if you have a clear reason during a pandemic, I think it makes sense. So I think their defense will be good again, which is always solid when you're running an option, which is what Lungford still does. But I have some questions about quarterback, because Shai Wertz is now at Louisville and he's going to be playing slot. So who's the QB? Like they got what? Caleb Hood, who's done it before. Well, no. Sorry, not Caleb Hood. I actually forgot who. Chip, I don't even know who's going to be the QB on this team.
Listen,
they get almost everybody else back.
Right. And they're to your point, there were no bad losses last year. You were right there with Louisiana. You were 28-14 loss at Coastal Carolina, but then a 1-point loss at Army, a 6-point loss in the rivalry game against Georgia State, and then an 8-point loss to App State. There is nothing from the body of work that suggests that this is a team that should feel inferior to its division opponents and the best teams that are in this conference. And so like, I totally understand why there is so much excitement about Georgia Southern, especially because Georgia Southern, and now that I'm talking this out, he's probably talking about App. Okay. Because that Georgia Southern App rivalry, that one goes back SoCon, right? Mm-hmm. So they've got a lot of long decades of hate right there. And listen, like Chad Lunsford is really one of your own, somebody who's been a part of the program in multiple times before eventually rising up through the ranks and taking over after being an interim coach. I mean, his full seasons as head coach, 10-3 year one, win the Camellia Bowl, 7-6 year two, lose in the Cure Bowl, 8-5 year three, win in the New Orleans Bowl. Listen, there's every single reason to be excited about where Georgia Southern is at. I do not feel like I've got the best grasp on the personnel side of things right now.
I found it in my notes here.
Probably okay.
Yeah. So I found it. I couldn't read my writing for a second. So they have Justin Tomlin back, right? He played for them last year, kind of sparingly. The numbers not great. They get James Graham, who transferred from Georgia Tech. Wasn't he at Georgia Tech like in the last PJ year, maybe? Or was he the guy that ran wild against Miami 2 years ago down there? You remember that game? Like I think it might have went to overtime.
It was like the win for Collins in year one.
Yeah.
That was like the signature win. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So like James Graham recruited by PJ means he's a guy who's capable of running the triple. So we'll see, what he can do. And then they signed Sam Kennerson. So given all the pieces back on offense, maybe this is a team that we should be, a little bit higher on. I looked at Bill Connolly's numbers here, and they're projected for 5-7 as a team. So to me, that really speaks to the quality of the East, but also like their non-conference schedule is fairly difficult. They get, they play at FAU, which hard to see them being a big favorite. They could win it, but like they're not going to be hugely favored. They host, or excuse me, they go, to Arkansas. They also play BYU, which, who knows what BYU, that's the second last game of the year.
They did beat FIU this year.
No, but they're playing FAU.
Yeah, that's what. Sorry, they
FAU,
beat Florida. Yeah. They beat Florida Atlantic 20-3 this past season. So they can win that. They
also
game.
Get Gardner Webb.
Yeah. Dub.
Yeah, but like ultimately, they're probably not going to beat Louisiana, I would say. And I think it's unlikely they win at App. But ultimately, like they have. I think the following games are very winnable. So Gardner Webb for sure is a win. FAU, I think is winnable. Arkansas State is winnable. They're at Troy, but I still think that's winnable. Like it's not a lock to win, but like I think it's possible. South Alabama, you can win. You can beat Georgia State. That's winnable. Coastal, you get them at home, so maybe, who knows? Texas State on the road, BYU at home. That's. I could see this team going 6-6 or 7-5. I think that's reasonable.
So we are slowly but surely morphing into the Destination Sun Belt East podcast in the college football podcast landscape. We listen. This is letting us know where our listeners' loyalties are at. You are going to make us better. If I didn't have this big old bag of mail, I wouldn't be as sharp about these Sun Belt games by the time we come around to August and September. So thank you for that. You can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Be sure if you're watching this, then you at least have the option to subscribe. YouTube.com/Cover3. We'll do more YouTube exclusives in the future. Bud, thank you very much.